It's hard to wake up every day and put on a brave face, even when you're feeling a mess inside. Pretending to be happy is difficult enough, but I also have had to pretend that I love my children, even though I don't. I'm Amelia, and I was 15 when I got pregnant. I was studying for my GCSEs and was predicted to get really good grades. I planned to go to medical school and become a doctor. My teachers and my parents told me I'd go far, and I believed them. I had big dreams for the future, and I couldn't wait to make all of them come true. But, oh well, I'd been going out with Edward for over a year before I lost my virginity to him. I really loved Edward, and being with him felt just right. We were always careful, though, when it comes to sex. We always used protection. That's why when I missed a period, I didn't think anything was wrong, and I was so busy cramming for my exams that I didn't notice. It was only when I started to get fat that I realized something was wrong, and I took a pregnancy test. It was positive. A doctor confirmed I was pregnant, 4 months pregnant to be exact. It was too far along to do anything, even if I had wanted to. I was really helpless. Edward was so excited that he was going to be a parent, but I wasn't. I knew this child was going to ruin my life, but I didn't do anything about it. I had a baby boy who we named John, and the three of us moved into a council flat. I had to drop out of school to look after the baby while Edward went to work. With no qualifications, the only job he could get was as a pot washer in a restaurant. But he worked hard and got promoted to chef. He was soon earning so much that we could afford to buy a house. I was pleased for him, but also a bit resentful. Why did he get to make a career for himself whilst I had to stay at home with the baby? 2 years later, it happened again. I was tired and felt sick and just knew. A thin blue line confirmed that I was pregnant for a second time. I didn't want this child either, but how could I tell Edward I didn't want his baby? So I had the baby anyway. It wasn't easy to keep my feelings to myself throughout the pregnancy, but I managed somehow. I lied and pretended to be happy. It was a girl, and we called her Evie. For the next 2 years, I stayed at home and looked after John and Evie whilst Edward carried on working. He soon got promoted to head chef. He then proposed to me with a beautiful ring, and I said yes because it felt like the right thing to do. On our wedding day, everyone told me how lucky I was to have 2 beautiful children and a gorgeous husband to look after us all. But deep inside, I didn't feel lucky. I hated my life and the person I'd become after giving up on my dreams and being stuck with my children. I really hated my life, and I even hated looking in the mirror. Every time I saw my reflection, all I could see was how having children has changed me. My tummy has loose skin and was covered in stretch marks. I had frown lines on my face and was getting gray hairs. And while all my friends were going on exotic holidays and getting promoted in their careers, I was stuck at home with 2 children. I couldn't even get a minute's peace to myself. The only thing keeping me going was Edward. He looked after the children even if he had worked a long shift. He cleaned the house when I couldn't face getting out of bed. He cooked the children their tea when I could only sit and cry. I didn't know what I would do without him. Then one day it all changed. Edward came home and sat on the sofa with his head in his hands and just started crying. He told me that he couldn't cope anymore, that he couldn't work every day and then come home and do everything around the house. He said he didn't want to be with me anymore, that he no longer loved me. And that night he packed a bag and left. We were over. For weeks, I wouldn't leave the house. I could barely get out of bed. I didn't take the children to school or nursery. I didn't even want to talk to them. I just fed them and let them sit in front of the TV all day. And then something happened. I got a letter through my door from a solicitor. Edward had applied for full custody of the children. He didn't think I was a fit mother and wanted to take them away from me. The letter said that he didn't even want me to have visitation rights. But I didn't see this as a punishment. It was my opportunity to be free. I had spent too long living a lie, which wasn't fair on Edward, the children, and most importantly, me. Edward could give everything to my children that I couldn't. So I agreed. 6 months passed, and my life became much better. I got a job working as a secretary at a doctor's office. I was making money, I made new friends and I'm retaking my GCSEs at night school. So basically, I'm starting to accomplish my dreams. But despite all that, I have to admit that something felt missing. But every time I felt that way, I reminded myself that leaving my children was my own decision and there wasn't any room for regret. I was convinced with that thought until one day, something happened that flipped my world upside down. I was at work when a young woman stormed in with a little girl. She was freaking out. I asked her what was wrong, and she said that her girl has high fever and she's constantly vomiting. She begged me to let the doctor see her without an appointment. I looked at the little girl's face, and I suddenly froze in my place. I couldn't move, talk, or call the doctor. The girl I was looking at was my little girl, Evie. She looked unwell. The woman's loud screaming brought me back to reality quickly. I let her in the doctor's office. I wanted to go in with her, but the woman gave me a weird look as if she was her mother. I wanted to push her away and tell her it was my daughter, but I had no right. I waited outside against my will, and I felt like ages went by before they were out. Little Evie looked better. I wanted to go hug her, tell her I miss her, but the sight of her in that woman's arms stopped me. It was my decision, I reminded myself. I shouldn't chicken out now. But I couldn't. Days went by and my feelings of guilt were building up. The truth was that I was a horrible human being. My own daughter was sick and some woman who replaced me was taking care of her. How did I get here? Ironically, I started to understand that I needed my kids only when I left them. I selfishly blamed them for everything wrong in my life when the real problem was never them. It was me. I couldn't handle what I was feeling anymore. I knew my kids will be home on the weekend, so I grabbed my stuff and I went to see them at their father's house. I knew that Edward wouldn't welcome me in, so I decided to take my chances and knock on the door. When it opened, in front of me stood the same woman I saw at the clinic. She looked at me and said with a soft voice, "May I help you?" From what I could see, Edward has moved on pretty fast in replacing me with a young, attractive woman. She also seemed to be taking care of his kids well, so I wouldn't blame him for choosing her. I stood there, not sure what to say, when I heard Evie's voice calling me, "Mommy." My face lit up. She ran up to me and I kneeled down to give her a hug. To my shock, my daughter was not running towards me. She was running towards who was apparently her new mommy. I froze in my place. The woman was asking me all sorts of things that I didn't really listen to. I just kept staring at my daughter who was in another woman's arms. That moment, I don't know what got to me. I quickly grabbed my daughter and I hugged her and started crying. I told the woman to back off. The woman freaked out and she started calling Edward. "Call 911, she screamed. Edward came in a hurry, and when he saw me, he stopped and seemed relieved somehow. And then he said, "It's okay, Edna. That's the mother." "Why are you here?" he asked. I said with tears in my eyes, "I can't believe you moved on this fast, Edward. A new mom for my kids. What were you thinking?" Edward then asked me to come in. He said that we should talk. I agreed to go in. My daughter was still in my arms. Edward asked me to relax. He said that Edna was the babysitter and the kids loved her. They were traumatized after what happened and they started calling the babysitter Mommy. He couldn't blame them. He said the kids had been through a really hard phase. By then I was sobbing. It might seem crazy to you, but I was just realizing what I have done. I told Edward that I wasn't in the right state of mind when I left them and that I can't go on my life anymore like nothing happened. I wanted to fix it. Edward seemed hesitant. He said that if I'm asking to get back into my children's lives, I needed to be patient and see what was in the best interest of our children. I couldn't simply walk in and out of their lives like that. To say the least, Edward was right. He was kind enough to allow me a second chance to be in my children's life. Since that day, I was determined to prove myself to my family. We went to therapy sessions together, and it even improved my relationship with Edward, who is still technically my husband. Nothing is fixed yet, and I am aware that we have a long way to go. But I know that someday, I'll be the mom and wife my family deserves. I'm working hard on it.
Hello, my name is Karen, and for as long as I can remember, My sister Jennifer and I have been like chalk and cheese. We look quite similar, both tall with curly black hair, but that's about the only thing that we have in common. Oh, and our birthdays are on the same day, but 2 years apart. She's older than me. She's super outgoing and is always the center of attention at family gatherings, whereas I tend to stick to the side of the room, and I guess you could say I'm quiet. She's obsessed with sports, and I'm obsessed with books. Boys are always chasing her, and well, the only boy who talks to me is our little brother Joe. Last summer, our parents decided it would be a fun family bonding experience to go on a road trip through France. We would camp along the way and practice our French and buy fresh baguettes every morning. Jennifer asked if she could bring her bike, and I made a trip to the library to stock up on books. When we reached our first campsite, I found a neat little spot between 2 trees to tie my hammock. Jennifer and Joe headed to the lake for a swim. It felt like paradise. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, there was a strange boy standing next to me grinning. He asked me my name and said he thought I was cute. I almost fell out my hammock. No one has ever told me I'm cute. Well, no one except my grandma, but that doesn't count. A boy thought I was cute. I kept expecting it to be some kind of prank, but he kept standing there and kept grinning, and soon I was grinning too. He told me his name was William and asked me if I'd like to take a walk down to the lake. I hesitated, but then agreed. Joe and Jennifer were still there, so maybe we could all hang out, and I couldn't wait to see Jennifer's face when she saw me with a boy. We made small talk as we walked to the lake, and as we got closer, I spotted Jennifer. William spotted her too, and guessed straight away that it was my sister. We all hung out at the side of the lake, and Jennifer kept diving in. She loved to show off, especially in front of boys. William was watching her, but at the same time, he reached out to hold my hand. I couldn't believe a boy was holding my hand. For the next few days, William and I continued to hang out. We went for walks together, and almost always bumped into my sister whilst she was out cycling. On the last day of our stay at the campsite, he made us a picnic and suggested we eat it down by the lake. I didn't really want to go there because ever since I'd met William, Jennifer had been teasing me, and I knew she would be at the lake as usual. But William was insistent. When we got there she was, and I suddenly felt really strange. William asked my sister to join us. I thought it was going to be a romantic last date, but now she was going to be third wheeling. The whole way through the picnic, William only had eyes for my sister, and he kept laughing at every little thing she said. At one point, I left to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, it was like he hadn't even noticed. I eventually felt tired and said goodnight to William. Jennifer came back to the tent with me, but she seemed quiet. She obviously knew I was upset. We got into our sleeping bags, and Jennifer went straight to sleep. I kept tossing and turning and thinking about William. He barely even acknowledged me. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard 2 voices outside our tent. I realized it was William and his friend Ben. They were laughing about something, and then I heard William saying, "Oh, I was only dating Karen to try and make her big sister Jennifer jealous. Jennifer ignored me that first day at the lake, so I figured the best way to get back at her is to date her sister. But what a mistake. Karen is so boring." I wanted to climb out of the tent and shout at him, but it didn't even seem worth it. He certainly wasn't my boyfriend anymore, and he didn't deserve me. How dare he say I was boring, and to treat me and my sister like that? He's the most immature boy I've ever met. I told Jennifer about it in the morning, and she wasn't even surprised. She said she figured it out pretty quickly that he wasn't a nice guy, but she didn't know how to tell me. She apologized that she hadn't stopped it sooner, but she'd wanted to let me experience dating a guy for myself. My sister is pretty feisty though, and she wouldn't let this go. She went out and found William And in front of all his friends, she told him exactly how immature he was. He went bright red and almost fell in the lake, and Jennifer and I stood there proudly, holding hands. As we walked back to our tent, my sister leaned over to me and whispered into my ear, "No guy will ever separate us, okay? Sisters before misters. Pinky promise? Pinky promise." What do you think of this story?